That moment when you finally get the recognition you deserve? It hits different when it's been denied to you for 5 long years. I remember the absolute shock on Derek Wilson's face when Rebecca Taylor, the executive vice president of Horizon Innovations, announced my name as the new director of data strategy for the merged organization. His jaw actually dropped. The same mouth that had spent years telling me I wasn't quite ready yet suddenly couldn't form words. Watching his carefully constructed facade crumble in that boardroom was possibly the most satisfying moment of my professional life. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 5 years, I was the invisible backbone of Meridian Technologies' data operations. I designed the analytics framework that powered our flagship product. I trained every new analyst who joined our team. I solved problems that had the engineering team stumped for weeks. But according to my manager Derek, I was perpetually not quite there yet when promotion time came around. The champagne fizzed in my glass as I stood by the window of the Grand Hotel's Mountain View Ballroom, watching Denver's skyline sparkle against the darkening Rockies. Meridian Technologies' annual leadership summit was in full swing, and this year was special. Horizon Innovations had just announced their acquisition of our company, promising exciting synergies and new growth opportunities. Corporate, speak for big changes coming. Emma Rodriguez, my closest ally in the data team, appeared at my elbow with a plate of appetizers. "Try the goat cheese thing," she said, nodding toward a small pastry. "It's spectacular." I smiled and took one. "Thanks. Have you heard anything about the reorganization plans?" Emma shook her head. "Nothing concrete. James Cooper went on about valuing our exceptional talent during his welcome speech, but we've heard that before. And yet Derek always seems to find just enough fault with my work to block every advancement," I said, keeping my voice low. Emma rolled her eyes. 5 years, Sarah. 5 years you've watched less qualified people move up, mostly men Derek plays golf with. I took a sip of champagne instead of responding. We'd had this conversation too many times. "Ladies," Derek's booming voice cut through our conversation as he approached, martini in hand. At 45, Derek Wilson had perfected the look of a tech executive, expensive watch, designer glasses, and an air of unearned confidence. "Enjoying the party?" "It's lovely," I replied politely. "The acquisition announcement has certainly added some excitement." "Indeed it has." Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "In fact, I just had a fascinating conversation with Rebecca Taylor from Horizon. She's very interested in our data architecture." My pulse quickened. The data architecture he was referring to was largely my creation, though Derek had taken credit for the framework in quarterly presentations for years. "I'd love to hear her thoughts on it," I said. "Perhaps you could introduce us?" Derek's smile tightened. "Let's not overwhelm our new partners with too many voices just yet, Sarah. I'll make sure your contributions are mentioned." He turned to Emma. "The CTO from Horizon is by the bar, very interested in our engineer training program. Would you mind sharing some insights?" Emma glanced at me before nodding and walking away, leaving me alone with Derek. "Sarah," Derek lowered his voice, "I want to address something. I heard you've been asking about the senior data strategist position opening in the new org structure." I maintained a neutral expression. "I believe I'm qualified for the role." "Qualified on paper, perhaps," Derek said, swirling his martini. "But leadership requires more than technical skills. It requires presence, influence, intangibles that come with time and proper mentorship." The same vague excuses I'd heard for years. I steadied my breathing before responding. 5 years under your mentorship hasn't developed these intangibles?" I asked, my tone deliberately light. Derek laughed as if I'd made a charming joke. "You're getting there, Sarah. But for this particular role, I'm putting forward Thomas from the Austin office. He has the executive presence we need during this transition. Thomas, 3 years my junior with half my technical expertise. I'd actually trained him when he joined the company. I see, I said simply. Don't look so disappointed, Derek said, patting my shoulder. I've recommended you for the senior analyst role on the integration team. It's a lateral move, but high visibility. Who knows? If you impress the right people, you might be looking at a promotion in another year or two. Another year or two, on top of the 5 already wasted. I smiled. Thank you for the opportunity. Derek seemed pleased with my response. That's what I've always appreciated about you, Sarah. You're a team player. He checked his watch. I should mingle. The Horizon executives are making their rounds. As he walked away, I maintained my pleasant expression. 5 years of practice had perfected my professional mask. What Derek didn't know, what no one knew, was that this time, I wasn't just going to nod and wait my turn. Not anymore. Because 3 weeks ago, I discovered exactly why Derek had been blocking my advancement for years, and I had finally gathered everything I needed to do something about it. It started with an accidental email. Derek had meant to forward a performance evaluation discussion to Thomas, his golden boy. Instead, he sent it to me. The message was brief but revealing. Added the feedback we discussed to Sarah's evaluation. Emphasized communication leadership gaps again. Should keep her in line for now while we position you for the strategy role post-merger. I stared at that email for a full 5 minutes, my hands trembling with rage. It confirmed what I'd suspected, but couldn't prove. Derek had been deliberately undermining me to elevate someone else. Someone more like him. I should have confronted him immediately. I should have marched into HR with the evidence. Instead, I did something much more effective. I began investigating. First, I pulled all my performance reviews from the past. 5 years. The pattern was glaring once I knew to look for it. Each contained praise for my technical abilities, followed by vague concerns about executive readiness or strategic thinking. Concerns that were never substantiated with specific examples. Classic techniques to create a paper trail justifying the lack of advancement. But the email suggested something else was happening. Active sabotage to position Thomas. I needed more evidence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I began documenting everything. Every project communication. Every instance where my work was presented without credit. Every time my ideas were dismissed in meetings only to be praised when repeated by male colleagues. Then came the breakthrough. While preparing data for the merger integration team, I was granted temporary access to historical project performance metrics. What I found was stunning. Projects I had led consistently outperformed those led by Derek's favorites, including Thomas, not by small margins, by significant metrics that would be meaningful to any executive. Yet in the quarterly leadership reports, these numbers had been aggregated in ways that obscured individual contributions. My successes had been deliberately buried in team averages, while certain other projects had been highlighted individually. I downloaded the raw data and created my own analysis, documenting the discrepancies between actual performance and what was reported up the chain. The pattern was undeniable. Still, I needed advice before proceeding. I reached out to a former colleague who had moved to a rival firm, describing my situation without naming names. She connected me with Olivia Chen, an employment attorney who specialized in workplace discrimination. Over coffee at the Copper Kettle, well away from any Meridian employees, Olivia reviewed my evidence. "This is compelling," she said, studying my analysis. "The email combined with the pattern in your evaluations and the manipulated reporting creates a clear picture." So, I have a case? I asked. Olivia nodded slowly. You do. But workplace discrimination cases are messy, expensive, and can follow you in your career, fair or not. She closed her notebook. Before we discuss legal options, let me ask you something. What do you actually want out of this? The question caught me off guard. I want the recognition I've earned, the advancement I deserve. Then perhaps there's a strategic approach that gets you what you want without a lengthy legal battle, Olivia suggested. You mentioned your company is being acquired? Yes, by Horizon Innovations. The deal closes in 6 weeks. And the integration teams are being formed now? I nodded. Then you have leverage and opportunity, Olivia said, leaning forward. Acquisitions reshuffle the power dynamics. New decision-makers will be evaluating talent based on data and results, not years of personal relationships. She outlined a strategy that was both simple and bold. Bypass Derek entirely and get my work in front of the acquisition team. But Derek controls all communication with Horizon, I pointed out. Olivia smiled. That's his official power. But in acquisitions, smart executives always look beyond the official channels to assess what they're really acquiring. I left that meeting with a plan, not for revenge, but for recognition. And it started with doing something I should have done years ago, building my network beyond Derek's sphere of influence. That evening, I sat in my downtown apartment, rain tapping against the windows as I reviewed project documentation from the past 3 years. Each slide deck, each analysis, each implementation plan testified to work I'd done that had been attributed to the team, to Derek, or in some cases, directly to Thomas. I had created the core architecture for our most successful product feature, the adaptive data modeling system that had increased client retention by 42%. Yet, in the official presentations, my contribution was reduced to a footnote. Technical, implementation by data team. I couldn't change the past presentations, but I could ensure the acquisition team saw the unfiltered reality. I compiled a comprehensive portfolio that reflected my actual contributions, backed by data, email trails, and code repositories showing my authorship. This wasn't about ego. It was about accuracy, about ensuring that Horizon understood what they were actually acquiring. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The floor was quiet, just the way I liked it before the days. Chaos began. I had barely settled at my desk when my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Heads up. Derek called emergency leadership meeting at 8:30. Something about unified communication protocols with Horizon. I checked the time. 7:15. Perfect. I had planned to initiate the first phase of my strategy today, and Derek's meeting actually created an ideal opportunity. I began by reaching out to Michael Lee in HR, who had always been fair in our limited interactions. I requested a career development meeting, a perfectly normal thing that wouldn't raise suspicions. I appreciate you making time for me, I told Michael when we met in his office later that day. I'm trying to position myself effectively during the acquisition transition. Michael nodded encouragingly. Smart thinking. Major reorganizations can create opportunities. That's my hope, I said. I've been in the same role for 5 years despite consistently exceeding performance metrics. I want to make sure the acquisition team has an accurate understanding of my contributions. Michael's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of recognition. 5 years without advancement despite strong performance is unusual, he noted carefully. I maintained a professional tone. I believe my work speaks for itself, if it's seen in its entirety. Then I handed him a document. This is a portfolio of my key projects and their outcomes. Would it be possible to ensure this is included in the talent assessment materials for Horizon? Michael reviewed the document thoughtfully. Typically, department heads select what materials are forwarded, but... He hesitated, then made a decision. I'll make sure the integration team receives this directly. Thank you, I said simply. I just want my work to be evaluated fairly. As I turned to leave, Michael spoke again. Sarah, yours isn't the only career that seemed unusually stalled under certain leadership. Our eyes met in understanding. I wasn't alone. I returned to my desk just as notifications about Derek's emergency meeting began populating everyone's calendars. The subject line read, Mandatory, Acquisition Communication Protocols. The conference room was already filling. When I arrived, Derek stood at the head of the table, his expression unusually stern. Once everyone was seated, he dove straight in. As we enter the critical phase of this acquisition, it's essential that we present a unified front to Horizon, he began. All communications, and I mean all, must be coordinated through the established channels. That means department heads review and approve any materials before they're shared with the integration team. His gaze swept the room, briefly lingering on me. I kept my expression neutral, interested, but not overly so. This isn't about controlling information, Derek continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. It's about ensuring consistency and accuracy. We don't want conflicting data points or contradictory projections creating confusion. Emma caught my eye from across the table, one eyebrow slightly raised. We both knew what this was really about: control. Derek was sensing his grip loosening and was trying to tighten it before the power dynamics shifted completely. Additionally, Derek added, I'll be conducting personal reviews of all performance assessments before they're forwarded to Horizon's HR team. We need to ensure these reflect our department's unified evaluation standards. Translation: he would be editing anything that didn't align with the narrative he'd constructed over years. Questions? Derek asked, his tone suggesting he didn't actually want any. Just a clarification, I said, keeping my voice even. For technical documentation and project specifications, should we provide the simplified overviews or the complete architectural details? Horizon's technical assessment team might want to dive deeper than our usual executive summaries. It was an innocent question on the surface, one that established me as helpful and cooperative while subtly highlighting the difference between surface presentations and substantive details. Derek smiled tightly. Good question, Sarah. Start with the overviews. If they request deeper dives, route those requests through me, and we'll determine the appropriate level of detail. Understood, I replied with a nod. As we filed out of the conference room, I felt Derek's eyes on my back. He'd always been politically astute. It was how he'd advanced through the ranks despite mediocre technical skills. He could sense when something was shifting, even if he couldn't identify exactly what it was. I needed to accelerate my timeline. That afternoon, I approached Emma with a more direct conversation. I need your help, I told her over lunch at a small cafe 2 blocks from the office. And it might put you in an awkward position. Emma set down her fork. I've watched you get passed over for 5 years while training your own competition. I'm already in an awkward position called righteous indignation. What do you need? I explained what I'd discovered and my plan to get my work directly in front of Horizon executives. Emma's role would be crucial. As our team's project coordinator, she had legitimate reasons to communicate with Horizon's technical assessment team. Can you make sure these technical briefs get to Rebecca Taylor? I asked, sliding a folder across the table. They're all legitimate project documents, just not filtered through Derek's presentation deck. Emma didn't hesitate. Consider it done. And Sarah? It's about damn time. Back at the office, I maintained my usual routine. I participated in integration planning sessions, offered insights when asked, and appeared to be the model team player Derek had always praised me for being, while simultaneously ensuring my unfiltered work was making its way to the right people through channels he couldn't monitor or control. 3 days later, I received a meeting request from Sophia Wright, a talented analyst who had recently transferred from another department. She'd been assigned to a technical assessment working group with Horizon, and I suspected Derek had placed her there because he thought she'd be easier to influence than more experienced team members. "I've been reviewing the integration documentation," Sophia said when we met in a small breakout room, "and something doesn't add up." "What's that?" I asked. "The project attribution data," she said, lowering her voice though we were alone. "I've been cross-referencing commit histories on our development platform with the project leadership claims, and there are discrepancies." I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of discrepancies?" Sophia pulled out her tablet and showed me a spreadsheet. "These major features, the ones that drove our growth last year?" The official documentation credits Thomas as the architectural lead, but the actual code repositories show you as the primary contributor by a significant margin. I nodded slowly. So Sophia had noticed the same patterns I had documented. "That's interesting," I said carefully. Sophia looked at me directly. "It's more than interesting, Sarah. It's systematic. And it's not just you. There are at least 3 other women in the department whose contributions have been redistributed." This was new information. I'd been so focused on my own situation that I hadn't fully investigated whether the pattern extended beyond me. Of course it did. Someone like Derek rarely limited his manipulations to a single target. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because the Horizon team is starting to notice," Sophia replied. "Their technical assessment lead, Rebecca Taylor, has requested additional verification of project authorship. She specifically mentioned the adaptive modeling framework you developed." A surge of hope rose in my chest, but I kept my tone measured. "I see. And how did Derek respond to that request?" "He hasn't seen it yet," Sophia said. "It came in through a technical channel, and I've been asked to compile the response." She paused. "I thought you should know before I proceed." The implication was clear. Sophia was offering me an opportunity, a chance to ensure the response was accurate, not filtered through Derek's revisionist lens. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention," I said. "The adaptive modeling framework was indeed my project. I have the original design documentation and development logs if that would be helpful for your response." Sophia smiled slightly. "That would be very helpful. I want to make sure my report is thorough and accurate." As I provided Sophia with the unfiltered documentation, I realized my strategy was working even better than anticipated. I had aimed to get my work in front of Horizon executives, but I hadn't expected them to actively investigate the attribution discrepancies on their own. Rebecca Taylor was clearly doing her due diligence, looking beyond the surface presentations to understand what and who Horizon was actually acquiring. The next week passed in a blur of integration meetings, technical documentation requests, and carefully orchestrated coincidental interactions with Horizon team members. Through it all, I maintained my professional demeanor, never once giving Derek reason to suspect I was operating outside his carefully controlled channels. Then, 10 days after my conversation with Sophia, I received an unexpected calendar invitation. Data Strategy Discussion, Rebecca Taylor, Horizon Innovations. My heart raced as I accepted the meeting, scheduled for the following day. That evening, I prepared meticulously. I reviewed all the key projects I'd led, refreshed my understanding of Horizon's product roadmap, and considered various scenarios that might unfold. This meeting could be the opportunity I'd been waiting for, or it could be nothing more than a routine technical discussion. Either way, I would be ready. I arrived 10 minutes early at the designated conference room, reviewing my notes and calming my nerves. Rebecca arrived precisely on time, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair and an air of efficient authority. "Sarah Mitchell," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for making time on short notice." "Of course," I replied, matching her professional tone. "I'm happy to provide any insights that might help with the integration." Rebecca sat down and got straight to the point. "I've been reviewing the analytics architecture your team developed. The performance metrics are impressive, and the scalability design is exactly what we've been trying to achieve at Horizon. Thank you, I said. It was a challenging project, but the results have validated our approach. Our technical assessment team was particularly impressed by the adaptive modeling framework, Rebecca continued. The documentation credits you as the primary architect. There was a question in her statement. I answered it directly. I developed the core architecture and led the implementation, I confirmed, though it was certainly a collaborative effort. Rebecca nodded, making a note. That's consistent with what we've found in our review. She looked up, studying me with new interest. Yet you're still in the same role you held 5 years ago, according to your HR records. The moment had arrived sooner than I'd expected. I could deflect, make excuses, or downplay the situation. Instead, I chose honesty. That's correct, I said calmly. My technical contributions have been recognized, but I've been repeatedly informed that I lack certain leadership qualities necessary for advancement. Interesting, Rebecca said, because your project management metrics and team feedback suggest otherwise. She opened a folder and pushed a document across the table. This is a leadership assessment our HR team compiled based on peer reviews and project outcomes. I'd be interested in your thoughts. The document contained evaluation metrics I'd never seen, unfiltered feedback from colleagues and team members, the scores for technical guidance, team development, and strategic thinking were all in the highest percentile. I wasn't aware of these assessments, I said carefully. They were conducted as part of our standard acquisition talent review, Rebecca explained. We find direct input from collaborators more valuable than filtered performance reviews. She closed the folder and regarded me directly. Sarah, Horizon is making significant changes to the organizational structure. We need leaders who can drive innovation and develop teams, not just maintain the status quo. She paused meaningfully. Your actual work and the feedback from your colleagues tell a very different story about your leadership capacity than your official performance evaluations. My pulse quickened, but I maintained my composure. I believe my work demonstrates my capabilities better than any evaluation could. I agree, Rebecca said with a slight smile, which is why I wanted to meet with you directly. She leaned forward. We're creating a new data strategy division that will be central to our combined product roadmap. Based on our assessment, you're the obvious choice to lead it. The words hung in the air between us. After 5 years of being told I wasn't ready, here was an executive who had evaluated my work objectively and reached the opposite conclusion. I appreciate your confidence, I said, finding my voice. May I ask where this division would sit? In the new structure? You would report directly to me, Rebecca answered. With a team of 12 initially, including budget authority and product input. She named a salary that was nearly double my current compensation. That's a significant promotion, I observed, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the elation building inside me. Rebecca nodded. It's the appropriate level for someone with your capabilities and accomplishments. She paused. Though I understand Derek Wilson had recommended you for a senior analyst role on the integration team. Here it was, the moment to choose how to address Derek's years of suppression. I could expose him, detail the evidence I'd gathered, explain how he'd deliberately held me back to advance others. Instead, I simply said, Derek and I have different assessments of my readiness for leadership. Rebecca's slight smile suggested she understood everything I wasn't saying. Different leadership styles often lead to different talent assessments. That's why we conduct our own reviews during acquisitions. A thorough approach, I agreed. We think so. Rebecca stood, extending her hand again. The formal offer will come through next week. I look forward to working with you in your new role, Sarah. After she left, I remained seated, letting the reality sink in. 5 years of frustration and overlooked potential were about to transform into the opportunity I'd always deserved. Not through confrontation or accusations, but through allowing my work to be seen clearly by the right people. I gathered my notes and walked back to my desk, nodding at colleagues along the way. Nothing in my expression revealed the seismic shift that had just occurred in my professional trajectory. That restraint, the ability to navigate complex emotions while maintaining focus, was exactly the kind of leadership quality Derek had claimed I lacked. When I returned to my desk, a message from Emma was waiting. "How did it go?" I replied simply, "Let's get coffee after work. Good news." The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. I participated in meetings, responded to emails, and completed my tasks as if nothing had changed, while inside, everything had. By allowing Horizon to see my work directly, by creating channels beyond Derek's control, I had finally broken free of the artificial ceiling he had constructed above me. As I walked to meet Emma at our favorite cafe after work, I reflected on the strange journey that had led to this moment. If Derek hadn't accidentally forwarded that email, would I have continued accepting his assessments? Would I have waited another year, another 2 years, believing there was something I needed to improve? Some mystical executive presence I needed to develop? The thought was sobering. How many others remained in that position, doubting their capabilities because someone in authority told them they weren't enough? Emma was already waiting when I arrived, curiosity evident in her expression. "Well, don't keep me in suspense." I slid into the seat across from her. "I've been offered a director position, data strategy division, reporting directly to Rebecca." Emma's eyes widened. "Holy shit, Sarah." She lowered her voice as heads turned toward us. "That's not a step up. That's a quantum leap." "Doubled. My salary, too," I added, still processing it myself. "And Derek?" Emma asked. "Does he know?" "Not yet," I said. "But he will soon. The formal announcement goes out next week." Emma's smile turned devious. "I would pay good money to see his face when he finds out." Then her expression softened. "You deserve this, Sarah. You've deserved it for years." I nodded, a complex mix of emotions washing through me. Validation, relief, pride, and yes, a certain satisfaction at the thought of Derek realizing his carefully constructed hierarchy was about to crumble. "What finally made the difference?" Emma asked. "The documentation we sent over?" "That started it," I confirmed. But Horizon was already investigating. Rebecca mentioned they found discrepancies in project attributions during their technical assessment. They conducted their own leadership evaluations too, peer reviews that Derek couldn't filter. Emma nodded thoughtfully. So they were specifically looking for undervalued talent. "Smart acquisition strategy," I noted. "Find the assets that aren't being properly leveraged." We talked for over an hour, discussing the implications of my new role, the projects I wanted to prioritize, the team I would build. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to think expansively about what I could accomplish with actual authority and support. As we were preparing to leave, Emma asked the question that had been hovering beneath our conversation. "Are you going to confront Derek about what he did? The systematic undermining, the credit theft, the manipulated evaluations?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "What would be the point? He knows what he did. And now, so does everyone who matters." Emma studied me. "That's remarkably generous." "It's not generosity," I clarified. "It's strategy. Fighting old battles distracts from winning new ones. Derek is the past. My focus needs to be on the future, on building something that proves just how wrong he was." The following Monday, Derek called an unexpected team meeting. His expression was tight as we gathered in the conference room. "I've just come from a leadership discussion with Horizon," he announced. There are going to be significant changes to our organizational structure. Emma caught my eye across the table, raising an eyebrow slightly. I kept my expression neutral. The integration is moving faster than anticipated, Derek continued. Some of you may be contacted directly by Horizon executives for specialized roles. His gaze flickered to me briefly. I remind everyone that all external communications should still be coordinated through proper channels. Too late, I thought. Far too late. Now, Derek forced a smile. Let's discuss this week's deliverables. The meeting proceeded normally, but there was a new tension in Derek's manner, a sense that things were happening beyond his control. For 5 years, he had been the gatekeeper to advancement. Now, the gates had been opened from the other side. 3 days later, the official announcement was emailed company-wide. Leadership structure for Horizon Meridian integration. I scrolled through the document until I found it. Data Strategy Division, new. Sarah Mitchell, Director. My phone immediately lit up with a text from Emma. Finally! Drinks tonight to celebrate? I smiled and responded, absolutely. As congratulatory messages poured in from colleagues, I noticed Derek hadn't appeared in the office. His calendar showed an unexpected day of external meetings. The following morning, he was waiting by my desk when I arrived. His attempt at a congenial smile didn't reach his eyes. Congratulations on the promotion, Sarah, he said, loud enough for nearby colleagues to hear. Always knew you had potential. Thank you, Derek, I replied evenly. He lowered his voice. I would have appreciated a heads up about your discussions with Rebecca. Going outside the established reporting structure creates unnecessary confusion. 5 years of suppressed responses rose to my lips. I could have confronted him with the email, the manipulated reports, the deliberate undermining of my career. I could have asked him how it felt to have his authority circumvented, just as he had circumvented my accomplishments for years. Instead, I simply said, I believe in letting my work speak for itself. His jaw tightened at the implied criticism. Well, you'll have plenty of opportunity to prove yourself now. Director is a significant jump, a challenging transition for someone without previous management experience. I'm looking forward to the challenge, I replied calmly. Derek nodded stiffly and walked away. He had lost this battle, and he knew it. But his parting comment revealed he still hoped I would fail, that I would prove him right in the end. I had no intention of giving him that satisfaction. 2 weeks later, I sat in my new office, an actual office with a door and a view of the mountains, preparing for my first leadership team meeting. A knock interrupted my thoughts. It was Sophia Wright, a talented analyst who had recently transferred from another department. Do you have a moment? She asked hesitantly. Of course, come in. Sophia closed the door and sat down. I wanted to thank you, she said. I've been with the company for 3 years and... She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. My experience under previous leadership wasn't positive. I nodded, understanding the subtext. I'm implementing a different approach to team development. I've noticed, Sophia said. And it's not just me. Everyone feels it. The way you acknowledge contributions, provide clear feedback, create growth opportunities. It's changing the entire culture of the division. Her words landed with unexpected weight. In my focus on finally achieving the position I deserved, I hadn't fully considered the impact I could have on others who had been similarly overlooked or undervalued. Thank you for telling me, I said. That means a lot. After Sophia left, I turned to look out at the mountains, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 5 years of patience and persistence, countless moments of self-doubt and frustration, the careful gathering of evidence, the strategic connections that finally allowed my work to be seen clearly. Derek had been wrong about my leadership capabilities, but he had inadvertently taught me something valuable. True leadership isn't about titles or authority. It's about impact and influence. Even without the official role, I had been leading, developing team members, creating innovative solutions, building support networks. And now, with the formal authority to match my capabilities, I could ensure that what happened to me wouldn't happen to others on my team. No more buried contributions, no more arbitrary barriers to advancement, no more waiting years for recognition that should have come much sooner. My first all-hands meeting as director was scheduled for 10 a.m. I'd spent the weekend planning how to set the tone for this new chapter. As people filed into the conference room, some I'd worked with for years, others newly assigned from various departments, I felt a surge of responsibility. These talented individuals were now looking to me for direction, for vision, for leadership. "Good morning, everyone," I began once the room had settled. "I want to start by thanking you all for your flexibility during this transition. Mergers always create uncertainty, but they also create opportunity." I paused, looking around the room. 12 faces watched me with expressions ranging from cautious optimism to outright curiosity. The Data Strategy Division has been created because both Meridian and Horizon recognize that data isn't just a support function, it's a central business driver. Our role will be defining how the combined company leverages data to create competitive advantage. I outlined our initial priorities: integrating the disparate data systems, establishing new governance protocols, and developing next-generation analytics capabilities that would differentiate our products in the marketplace. But before we dive into specifics, I continued, I want to share my leadership philosophy. First, innovation comes from everywhere. Titles don't determine the value of ideas. Second, credit goes where credit is earned. Your contributions will be recognized and rewarded. And third, growth is a priority. I expect everyone on this team to develop new skills and tackle new challenges, and I'll make sure you have the support to do that successfully. I could see the impact of these words, particularly on team members who had worked under Derek. One analyst, David, who had been repeatedly passed over for project lead roles despite his exceptional technical skills, sat up straighter. Emma, now my deputy director, smiled knowingly. "Questions before we move on to specific assignments?" I asked. "What's our relationship with other departments?" asked Marcus from the former Horizon team. Historically, our data team was brought in late in product development, which created bottlenecks. "Excellent question," I replied. "I'm meeting with all department heads this week to establish new protocols. We'll be integrated from the beginning of the development cycle, not as an afterthought. My calendar is open. You'll see these meetings already scheduled." Another hand went up. "How will project attribution work?" This from Priya, a brilliant data scientist who had joined 6 months ago. "Transparently," I said firmly. "All project documentation will clearly identify individual contributions along with team accomplishments. Your work will be visible at all levels of the organization." The meeting continued with detailed discussion of our first initiatives. As we wrapped up, I noticed a new energy in the room, a sense of purpose and possibility that hadn't been there before. Emma stayed behind after others had left. "Well done," she said. "You've already got them inspired." "It's a start," I replied, "but culture change takes time." "Speaking of change," Emma said, lowering her voice though we were alone, "have you heard about Derek's new role?" I hadn't. After our brief confrontation following my promotion announcement, Derek had made himself scarce, communicating primarily through terse emails when necessary. "He's been moved to strategic legacy systems," Emma said with barely concealed satisfaction. "Maintaining outdated platforms until they can be decommissioned. Team of 3, no growth budget." I raised an eyebrow. That's quite a change from heading data operations. "Rebecca isn't subtle," Emma observed. "The acquisition team did their homework on more than just you, apparently." I considered this information. Derek's effective demotion wasn't my doing, at least not directly. I had never spoken against him to Rebecca or anyone at Horizon. I had simply ensured my own work was accurately represented. The rest had followed, naturally once the pattern became visible. "Let's focus on our division," I said after a moment. "Derek's situation isn't our concern." Emma nodded, but her smirk remained. Of course, high road all the way. The first month in my new role passed in a whirlwind of strategic planning, team building, and system integration. I worked longer hours than ever, but with a fundamentally different energy. This wasn't the grinding effort to prove my worth that had characterized my previous 5 years. This was the exhilarating challenge of building something meaningful with actual authority and support. I established weekly one-on-ones with each team member, creating individual development plans that aligned their growth with our division's objectives. I instituted innovation afternoons, where team members could explore new approaches without immediate deliverable pressure. I created transparent project documentation systems that ensured everyone's contributions were visible and acknowledged. Small changes, perhaps, but they quickly began yielding results. Team morale improved measurably. Ideas flowed more freely in meetings. Cross-functional collaboration increased as other departments recognized our team's expertise and responsiveness. 6 weeks into my tenure, Rebecca requested a progress review. I prepared a comprehensive update on our integration milestones, technical achievements, and strategic initiatives. "I'm impressed," she said after reviewing my presentation in her office. "You've accomplished more in 6 weeks than some divisions manage in 6 months." "The team is exceptional," I replied. "They just needed the right environment to thrive." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "That's precisely what separates good managers from great leaders, the ability to create conditions where talent flourishes." She closed my report and leaned back in her chair. "Which brings me to something I've been meaning to discuss with you." I waited, curious. "The way your abilities were systematically undervalued at Meridian, it wasn't unique to you," she said. "Our talent assessment revealed similar patterns with several employees, particularly women and people of color. This confirmed what Michael from HR had hinted at, and what I had begun to suspect through my own investigation. Derek's approach to talent management had affected many careers beyond mine. "That's troubling, but not surprising," I said carefully. "Indeed," Rebecca agreed. "Which is why we're implementing a company-wide talent review process, one that uses objective metrics and multiple evaluators to eliminate individual bias." She slid a document across her desk. "I'd like you to serve on the design committee for this initiative. Your experience gives you unique insight into the problems we're trying to solve." I looked at the proposal, a comprehensive overhaul of how performance was evaluated, how promotion decisions were made, and how high potential employees were identified and developed. "This is significant," I observed. "Structural change, not just policy tweaking." "Exactly," Rebecca said. "Addressing individual cases of bias is necessary but insufficient. We need systems that prevent those cases from arising in the first place." I thought about my years of frustration, the careful documentation of my contributions, the strategic maneuvering required to finally break through the artificial ceiling Derek had constructed. "I'd be honored to contribute to this," I said. "No one should have to work as hard to be seen fairly as I did." Rebecca smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. The first committee meeting is next Thursday." As I left Rebecca's office, I felt a deeper sense of purpose emerging. My personal victory in securing the leadership role I deserved was satisfying, but the opportunity to help reshape the system itself, to make the path easier for others, that was truly meaningful. The Talent Review Committee consisted of 7 people, 3 executives including Rebecca, 2 HR specialists, an external consultant specializing in organizational development, and me. I was the only non-executive from the operational side of the business, which initially made me question my place at the table. You're here precisely because you're closer to the front lines, Rebecca explained during our first meeting. We need your perspective on how policies actually play out in day-to-day work environments. The external consultant, Dr. Elaine Marquez, had decades of experience helping organizations address systemic bias in their talent processes. She led us through a methodical analysis of current practices, identifying critical points where subjective judgment could undermine fair evaluation. The research is clear, Dr. Marquez explained. Vague assessment criteria like executive presence or cultural fit often serve as proxies for bias, allowing evaluators to justify decisions based on gut feeling rather than demonstrable performance. I thought of Derek's perpetual critique of my leadership readiness without specific examples or improvement metrics. Classic case in point. Our goal, Dr. Marquez continued, is to create a system with clear, behavior-based criteria that minimizes subjectivity while still recognizing the complexity of professional contributions. Over the next several weeks, we developed a new framework that addressed the most problematic aspects of the current system. First, we replaced vague competency descriptions with specific, observable behaviors. Strategic thinking became identifies market opportunities, anticipates competitive responses, and connects tactical activities to long-term objectives, all of which could be evidenced through concrete examples. Second, we implemented calibration sessions where managers from different departments would review each other's evaluations, challenging assessments that lacked specific supporting examples and identifying inconsistent standards. Third, we separated performance evaluation from promotion decisions, creating a more structured advancement process with clear criteria for each level and role. And finally, we established regular talent reviews specifically focused on identifying employees who consistently delivered strong results without corresponding advancement, potential cases where bias might be limiting recognition. Throughout this process, I drew on my own experience while being careful not to make it personal. This wasn't about Derek or even about my specific situation. It was about creating systems that worked fairly for everyone, regardless of who their manager happened to be. As we finalized our recommendations, Rebecca pulled me aside after one meeting. "Your contributions to this committee have been invaluable," she said. "You've turned a negative experience into constructive change that will benefit hundreds of employees." "It's been therapeutic, honestly," I admitted, taking the frustration I felt and channeling it into systemic improvement. "That's the mark of true leadership," Rebecca observed, "using personal challenges to create broader positive impact." While my work on the talent committee proceeded, my primary focus remained developing my team and delivering on our division's objectives. 3 months after the acquisition, we launched our first major initiative, an integrated data platform that unified customer information across all product lines, creating a seamless experience that our competitors couldn't match. The project had been Sophia's idea originally, something she'd proposed to Derek 6 months earlier and had been dismissed as too ambitious. When she cautiously mentioned it in one of our innovation sessions, I immediately recognized its potential. "This is exactly the kind of transformative thinking we need," I told her. "Draft a formal proposal, and we'll present it to the executive." Sophia looked surprised. "Really? Just like that?" "Your idea has merit," I said simply. "It deserves proper consideration." 2 weeks later, Sophia and I stood before the Executive Leadership Committee, including the CEO, James Cooper. She presented her concept flawlessly, addressing potential technical challenges and highlighting the substantial customer experience improvements the platform would deliver. When she finished, James nodded appreciatively. "Impressive vision. How soon could we implement something like this?" I stepped forward. "We've already developed a phased implementation plan. With appropriate resources, we could have the first integration layer operational within 3 months." James looked at Rebecca, who nodded. "The Data Strategy Division has my full confidence. If Sarah and her team believe they can deliver this, I support allocating the necessary resources. And just like that, Sophia's too ambitious idea became our division's flagship project, with executive sponsorship and dedicated budget. As we walked back to our department, Sophia could barely contain her excitement. "I can't believe that just happened," she said. "I've never had an idea taken seriously at that level before." "Get used to it," I told her with a smile. "This is the first of many." 3 months later, right on schedule, we launched the initial phase of the integrated platform. The results exceeded even our optimistic projections. Customer satisfaction scores increased by 22%, cross-product adoption rose by 35%, and our support teams reported a 40% reduction in data-related service issues. The success catapulted our division into the spotlight. Suddenly, other department heads were seeking our input on their initiatives. The CEO mentioned our platform in his quarterly earnings call. Industry publications wrote about our innovative approach to customer data integration. And through it all, I made certain that credit flowed appropriately. Sophia was recognized as the concept originator in all internal and external communications. Team members who delivered key components saw their contributions highlighted in company-wide updates. When I was invited to speak at an industry conference about the platform, I brought Sophia and 2 other team members to present alongside me. This approach wasn't just about fairness, though that mattered deeply to me. It was also strategically sound. By creating a culture where contributions were visibly valued, I was building a team that attracted and retained top talent. People wanted to work in our division because they knew their work would be seen and appreciated. 6 months into my leadership role, I received an unexpected meeting request from Thomas, Derek's former protege who had been positioned to take the strategy role I now occupied. Since the reorganization, he had been reassigned to a product management position in another division. We hadn't interacted directly since the acquisition. I accepted the meeting with curiosity, unsure what he wanted. "Thanks for making time," Thomas said as he settled into the chair across from my desk. He seemed uncomfortable, fidgeting with his watch. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened before the acquisition." I maintained a neutral expression. "What specifically, Thomas?" He took a deep breath. "I didn't know, not completely, what Derek was doing to block your advancement. I knew he favored me, but I didn't understand the extent to which he was actively undermining you." This was unexpected. I had assumed Thomas was a willing participant in Derek's manipulation, not just a beneficiary. "I see," I said carefully. "What changed your perspective?" "The Talent Review Committee findings," he replied. "When the new evaluation system was announced, I reviewed the documentation out of professional interest. The examples of problematic practices." He paused. They were familiar. Things I'd seen Derek do, not just with you, but with others. The Talent Committee's work had been implemented company-wide 2 months earlier, with comprehensive guidelines and training for all managers. We had deliberately used anonymized examples to illustrate problematic evaluation practices, never specifically mentioning Derek or anyone else. But for those who had worked closely with him, the patterns would be recognizable. It made me question how much of my own advancement was earned versus handed to me, Thomas continued, and whether I was truly ready for the roles I was being groomed for. His honesty surprised me. "What do you think now?" I asked. "I think I have a lot to learn," he said simply. "My current manager is tough but fair. For the first time, I'm getting real feedback on areas where I need development, not just praise for being one of the guys." I nodded slowly. That kind of genuine feedback is valuable, even when it's challenging to hear. "Exactly," Thomas agreed. "I guess I'm here because I wanted to apologize. I benefited from a system that was unfair to you and others. I didn't create it, but I didn't question it either." His apology seemed sincere, and in a way, Thomas had been as much a product of Derek's manipulative leadership as I had been, just positioned differently within it. "I appreciate that, Thomas," I said. "But the most meaningful apology is changed behavior. Keep questioning systems that seem unfair, even when, especially when, they benefit you." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm trying to do that." He stood to leave, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, what you've done with the data strategy division is incredible. The integrated platform has made our product team's work so much more effective." "Thank you," I said. "That was Sophia Wright's concept, actually. Brilliant idea that just needed the right support to flourish." Thomas smiled slightly. "See? That right there. Giving credit openly. That's different. That's better." After Thomas left, I reflected on our conversation. His apology wasn't necessary for my healing or success. I had moved beyond needing validation from anyone connected to that period of my career. But his recognition of the systemic problems represented something important. The cultural shift we were trying to create was taking root. People were beginning to question practices they had previously accepted as normal. They were recognizing how bias operated not just in obvious discrimination, but in subtle systems of preference and exclusion. They were seeing how everyone, even those who benefited from unfair systems, ultimately lost something valuable in the process. 1 year after my promotion, I stood at a podium addressing the Women in Technology Leadership Conference, sharing my journey from perpetual senior analyst to division director. Without naming names or companies, I described the challenges of navigating biased systems and the strategies that finally allowed my contributions to be recognized. "The most important lesson I learned," I told the audience, "is that your value isn't determined by someone else's assessment. Your work, your impact, your capabilities, these are real regardless of whether they're officially recognized." After my talk, a young woman approached me, clutching a notebook. "Your story resonated with me," she said. "I'm in a similar situation, stuck under a manager who keeps moving the goalposts for advancement." I nodded in understanding. "Document everything," I advised her. "Build connections beyond your direct supervisor. And most importantly, don't internalize their limitations as your own. Sometimes the right opportunity comes from unexpected directions." As we talked, I realized my experience had value beyond my own career advancement. It had become a roadmap for others facing similar barriers, proof that persistence and strategic thinking could overcome even entrenched obstacles. 5 years of being held back had been frustrating and unjust. But the lessons I'd learned during that time about organizational dynamics, evidence-based advocacy, and resilient leadership had prepared me for success in ways that an easier path might not have. I returned from the conference to find an email from Rebecca waiting in my inbox. The subject line read simply, "Next steps." The message was brief. "Your division's success speaks for itself. I'd like to discuss expanding your role to include oversight of our global data strategy and the newly formed AI initiatives. Let's talk tomorrow about what that would look like." I smiled as I read it. Just 18 months ago, I had been fighting for basic recognition of my contributions, trapped under an artificial ceiling created by one biased manager. Now I was being offered expanded responsibilities that would shape the company's future direction. The journey hadn't been easy or fair. It had required strategic patience, meticulous documentation, and the courage to bypass established channels when necessary. It had demanded that I maintain my confidence even when the system was designed to undermine it. But ultimately, it had led to something better than I had initially imagined. Not just personal advancement, but the opportunity to create systemic change that would benefit countless others. As I drafted my response to Rebecca, I thought about Derek, now managing a small team in a department with no growth trajectory. I felt no satisfaction in his diminishment, only a calm certainty that organizational justice had finally prevailed. The truth of our respective capabilities had eventually become clear to those who mattered. Sometimes the people who try to limit your growth end up teaching you exactly how to overcome them. And sometimes, the skills you develop while navigating unfair systems are precisely the ones that prepare you to transform those systems when you finally break through. In that sense, perhaps I owed Derek a certain gratitude. His attempt to block my advancement had ultimately made me more strategic, more resilient, and more determined to create a different kind of leadership culture when I finally had the chance. And that, in the end, was the most meaningful victory of all. 6 months into my leadership role, the data strategy division had exceeded every performance metric Horizon had established. Our integrated customer data platform was revolutionizing how the company understood client needs, boosting retention rates, and increasing cross-sell opportunities. The executive team had taken notice, with CEO James Cooper specifically mentioning our division's transformative impact during the quarterly earnings call. But more meaningful than the business results was the cultural transformation within our team. People were thriving in ways they hadn't before. Ideas flowed freely in our meetings. Junior analysts confidently presented concepts directly to senior leadership. Team members from diverse backgrounds received equal consideration for high-visibility projects. On a Tuesday morning in early spring, I arrived at the office to find Rebecca waiting by my door, coffee cup in hand. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Of course," I replied, unlocking my office and gesturing for her to enter. Once we were seated, Rebecca got straight to the point. The board's compensation committee has approved a significant expansion of our leadership development program, focused specifically on identifying and accelerating high-potential women and underrepresented minorities. I nodded. "That's excellent news." "They want you to lead it," Rebecca continued, studying my reaction carefully. "Not instead of your current role, in addition to it. Executive Vice President of Data Strategy and Leadership Development." I blinked, taking in the magnitude of this opportunity. EVP was 2 levels above my current position, a jump that typically took years, not months. "That's quite a promotion," I managed. Rebecca smiled. "It's the appropriate level for what we're asking you to build. This isn't just about training programs or mentorship initiatives. We want systemic change in how we identify, develop, and advance talent throughout the organization." She slid a folder across my desk. The compensation reflects the expanded scope, of course. I opened it and couldn't help the small gasp that escaped me. The salary figure was triple what I'd been making as a senior analyst just 7 months ago. "This is based on the impact you've had in a remarkably short time," Rebecca explained. "Not just the business results, though those have been exceptional. It's the cultural transformation. People want to work in your division. They're turning down external offers with higher salaries because they value the environment you've created." I processed this information, trying to maintain my professional composure despite the emotions swirling inside me. 7 months ago, I'd been fighting for basic recognition. Now I was being offered an executive role with organization-wide influence. "I'm honored," I said finally. "And yes, I accept." Rebecca nodded, clearly pleased. "I thought you might. We'll announce it next week at the Quarterly Leadership Summit." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and James wants you to present the Leadership Development Framework at the board meeting next month. They're quite eager to hear your vision." After she left, I sat quietly, allowing the reality to sink in. Executive Vice President, board presentations, organizational transformation. These weren't just job responsibilities, they were platforms for creating the kind of change I'd always believed possible but had been prevented from pursuing. The universe, it seemed, had a certain poetic justice. In trying to contain me within narrow boundaries, Derek had ultimately propelled me toward opportunities far beyond what either of us had imagined possible. I reached for my phone to text Emma the news, then hesitated. The formal announcement wouldn't come for a week. Better to wait until then, allowing Rebecca and the executive team to manage the communication properly. Instead, I turned to the draft proposal I'd been developing for the leadership integration between Meridian and Horizon. There was still work to be done, regardless of my new title. The promotion wasn't an endpoint, it was a beginning, an expanded platform for the real work that mattered. My phone chimed with a calendar invitation. Strategic Planning Review, Thursday, 2 p.m. The organizer was Derek Wilson. I frowned slightly at the screen. Since his effective demotion to the legacy systems team, our paths had rarely crossed. What could he possibly want to review with me? Professional curiosity won out, and I accepted the invitation. When Thursday arrived, I made my way to the small conference room Derek had booked. He was already there, arranging papers on the table, with methodical precision, a habit I remembered from our years working together. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Sarah, thank you for coming." His tone was formal, lacking the condescending warmth he had once used with me. "Of course," I replied, taking a seat across from him. "What can I help you with?" Derek straightened the edges of his papers, a gesture I recognized as nervous preparation. "I've been asked to transition the legacy customer tracking system to your division's integrated platform. The CFO wants all client data migrated by end of quarter." I nodded. This made sense from a business perspective, though it effectively meant Derek's team would be working under my direction for the project. "That's doable," I said. "We've already developed migration protocols for the other legacy systems. Sophia Wright can coordinate with your team on the technical requirements." Derek cleared his throat. "Actually, that's why I wanted to meet directly. The system architecture is complex. I designed much of it myself, and there are certain idiosyncrasies that aren't well documented." What he wasn't saying was equally clear. The migration would require his personal involvement and expertise. He couldn't simply hand it off to a junior team member. "I understand," I said evenly. "How would you prefer to approach the knowledge transfer?" Derek seemed slightly surprised by my straightforward response. Perhaps he had expected resistance or even a hint of satisfaction at our reversed positions. "I've prepared a preliminary transition plan," he said, pushing a document toward me. "I thought we could review it together before involving the wider teams." As we worked through his proposal, I noticed something unexpected. Derek was thoroughly prepared. His technical recommendations were sound, and he was being unusually direct about the system's limitations. No posturing, no vague assurances, no attempts to exaggerate his importance. Just clear, professional communication. "This is comprehensive," I said when we finished the review. "It gives us a solid foundation for the migration. I appreciate the thoroughness." Derek nodded, gathering his papers. "I want the transition to be successful. Whatever our past differences, I respect the platform your team has built. It's genuinely impressive." The acknowledgement was so unexpected that for a moment I didn't know how to respond. "Thank you," I said finally. "I'll have Sophia reach out tomorrow to schedule the technical deep dives." As we stood to leave, Derek hesitated. "Sarah, he began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "The announcement next week, about your promotion to EVP. Congratulations." My surprise must have shown on my face. The announcement hadn't been made public yet. "Rebecca cleared it with the integration committee yesterday," Derek explained, correctly interpreting my expression. "I'm still on the distribution list for the meeting minutes." "I see," I said cautiously, unsure where this conversation was heading. Derek looked away, focusing on some point beyond my shoulder. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "About your leadership capabilities, about a lot of things." The admission hung in the air between us, bridging 5 years of manufactured limitations and deliberate obstacles. I could have responded with justified anger, pointing out how his actions had delayed my career and impacted my life. I could have dismissed his acknowledgement as too little, too late. Instead, I chose a different path. "Thank you for saying that," I said simply. "It matters." Derek nodded once, the gesture containing both acknowledgement and a hint of shame. Without further comment, he gathered his materials and left. I remained in the conference room for a few minutes, processing the interaction. Derek's admission hadn't erased the past, but it had shifted something in the present, providing a form of closure I hadn't realized I needed. His recognition of his mistake wasn't about me needing validation. It was about the possibility that people who create unfair systems can sometimes come to recognize the harm they've caused. The following week brought the official announcement of my promotion to Executive Vice President. The company-wide email from CEO James Cooper highlighted my exceptional leadership in transforming our data strategy and commitment to developing diverse talent. The message concluded with details about my expanded role overseeing the new leadership development initiative. The congratulations poured in, emails, texts, colleagues stopping by my office with warm wishes. Emma organized an impromptu celebration in our department, complete with champagne and an impressive cake that read, "Congrats EVP Mitchell." As the team gathered around, glasses raised, Emma clinked a spoon against her flute to get everyone's attention. "A toast," she announced, "to Sarah, who showed us all what happens when talent finally gets the recognition it deserves." The team cheered, and I felt a wave of gratitude for these colleagues who had supported me through the transition and embraced the culture we were building together. "Thank you all," I said when the applause subsided. "But this promotion isn't just about me. It's about the extraordinary work this division has accomplished together, and about the opportunity we now have to help shape the future of this company." I looked around at the faces of my team, diverse in background, experience, and perspective, but united in purpose. What we're building here isn't just a better data strategy. It's a better way of working, one where ideas are valued regardless of their source, where contributions are recognized fairly, and where artificial barriers don't limit potential. My gaze fell on Sophia, who had grown remarkably in confidence since her transfer to our division. Her innovative approach to customer journey analytics had recently been featured in an industry publication, with her name prominently credited, something that never would have happened under previous leadership. The Leadership Development Initiative will take what we've created here and expand it company-wide, I continued. We have the chance to transform how talent is recognized and developed throughout the organization. That's the real victory, not my title change. As the celebration continued, Rebecca appeared at my office door, observing the scene with evident satisfaction. "You've built something special here," she said when I joined her. "It's palpable, the energy, the engagement, the sense of possibility. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they're truly seen and valued," I replied. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "That's precisely why the board was so unanimous about your promotion. They see the impact of your leadership approach, not just in business metrics, but in talent retention and innovation." She gestured toward the conference room where I would soon be presenting to the executive team about the Leadership Development Initiative. "Shall we? They're eager to hear your vision." The executive boardroom was intimidating by design. Rich wood paneling, imposing leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. As the leadership team assembled, I felt a momentary flutter of nerves, quickly replaced by steady confidence. I belonged here. My ideas deserved this platform. "Thank you all for the warm welcome to the executive team," I began once everyone was seated. "Today, I want to outline our approach to leadership development. Specifically, how we'll identify and accelerate high-potential talent that may have been overlooked in traditional advancement processes." For the next 40 minutes, I presented a comprehensive framework based on 3 core principles: objective performance measurement, structural bias mitigation, and intentional inclusivity. I detailed the specific systems we would implement, from blind review processes for project Assignments to structured sponsorship programs for underrepresented groups. The goal, I explained, isn't to lower standards or create preferential treatment. It's to remove the artificial barriers that prevent our best talent from reaching their full potential, regardless of background, style, or demographic profile. When I finished, CEO James Cooper was the first to respond. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Traditional approaches haven't created the diverse leadership pipeline we've been aiming for. What you're proposing is both principled and practical. The CFO leaned forward. I'm particularly impressed by the accountability metrics. Tying executive compensation to talent development outcomes sends a powerful message about our priorities. The discussion continued, with thoughtful questions and constructive suggestions that refined rather than challenged the core approach. By the end of the meeting, we had full executive alignment on implementing the framework, with a commitment to report progress directly to the board on a quarterly basis. As we wrapped up, James made a final comment that resonated deeply. "What strikes me most about this initiative," he said, looking directly at me, "is that it's built from lived experience. Sarah understands these challenges because she's navigated them herself. That perspective is invaluable as we transform our approach to talent." His words acknowledged something important, that my journey through barriers and biases hadn't been wasted. It had provided insights that now informed organizational change at the highest level. The very experiences that had once felt so frustrating were now the foundation for solutions that would benefit countless others. That evening, as I drove home along the winding road that overlooked the city, I reflected on the remarkable path that had led to this moment. Just over a year ago, I had been sitting in a similar car, tears of frustration threatening as I processed yet another vague explanation for why I wasn't ready for advancement. Now I was helping reshape how an entire organization identified and developed leadership talent. The difference wasn't just in my title or compensation, significant as those changes were. It was in the scope of impact, in the ability to create systemic change rather than merely navigate broken systems. It was in the opportunity to ensure that others wouldn't have to fight the same battles I had. 3 months into my expanded role, the Leadership Development Initiative was showing promising early results. We had implemented a structured talent identification process that emphasized objective performance metrics over subjective assessments. We had established cross-departmental mentorship programs that connected high-potential employees with senior leaders outside their direct reporting lines. We had created transparency in advancement criteria, clearly documenting the specific capabilities required for each level. Most significantly, we had begun shifting the cultural understanding of what leadership looked like. Through case studies, training programs, and visible role models, we were expanding the perception of leadership beyond traditional stereotypes. Quiet strength was valued alongside assertive confidence. Collaborative achievement was recognized, alongside individual performance. Diverse approaches to problem-solving were celebrated rather than constrained. On a crisp fall morning, I received an unexpected email from a name I didn't immediately recognize. Maya Chen. The subject line read, "Your talk changed my path." "Dear Ms. Mitchell," the message began. "You won't remember me, but I approached you after your presentation at the Women in Technology Leadership Conference last year. I was the junior analyst struggling under a manager who kept moving the goalposts for my advancement. I did remember her, a bright young woman with determined eyes and a notebook full of questions. Your advice to document everything, build networks beyond my direct supervisor and not internalize others' limitations gave me the courage to take action. 6 months later, I received a promotion to lead my own analytics team at a different company. The strategies you shared made all the difference in how I approached my situation." The email continued, detailing how Maya had implemented some of the same cultural changes in her new team that I had established in my division. "I'm creating the environment I wish I'd had earlier in my career," she wrote. "And it's making a difference not just for me, but for everyone on my team." As I read her words, I felt a profound sense of connection to this woman I barely knew. Her story was both uniquely hers and universally familiar. A talented professional navigating flawed systems, seeking recognition proportional to her contributions. The fact that my experience had helped guide her journey represented exactly the kind of impact I had hoped to create. I wrote back immediately, congratulating Maya on her success and inviting her to connect the next time she was in Denver. Her message was a powerful reminder that change happens both systemically and individually, through formal programs and policies, yes, but also through personal connections and shared wisdom. Later that day, I met with Rebecca for our weekly check-in. She had news to share. The board approved the expansion of your leadership development initiative to all our international offices, she announced. They were particularly impressed by the early metrics showing improved retention of high-potential employees from underrepresented groups. That's fantastic, I replied. The regional teams have been eager to implement the framework. This gives them the resources to move forward. Rebecca nodded. There's more. James is restructuring the executive team to create a new position, Chief Talent Officer, reporting directly to him. He wants you to take the role. I took a moment to process this. Chief Talent Officer at a company with over 10,000 employees worldwide. A C-suite position less than 2 years after I had been a perpetually overlooked senior analyst. The role would encompass all aspects of talent strategy, Rebecca continued. Recruitment, development, advancement, culture, essentially formalizing and expanding what you've already begun with the leadership initiative. When would this take effect? I asked. January 1st with the new fiscal year, Rebecca replied. There's one other element I think you'll appreciate. The role includes oversight of a new external advisory board focused on workplace equity, with significant budget for research and pilot programs. The opportunity was extraordinary. A platform to create meaningful change at scale, backed by resources and executive support. It represented not just professional advancement, but the chance to address systemic issues that affected thousands of careers. I'd be honored to accept, I said. Rebecca smiled. James will be delighted. He's scheduled an announcement for next week's all-hands meeting. As I walked back to my office, I passed Derek in the hallway. Since our conversation about the system migration, our interactions had been professional but limited. He nodded politely as we passed. Derek, I said, stopping. Do you have a minute? He looked surprised but agreed, following me to a nearby meeting room. I wanted to let you know that the customer tracking system migration has been completed ahead of schedule, I said once we were seated. Your documentation was excellent. It made the process much smoother than anticipated. I'm glad to hear it, he replied. Your team was very thorough in the implementation. There was a hint of genuine admiration in his tone that would have been unimaginable a year ago. People could change, it seemed, when circumstances forced them to see beyond their preconceptions. There's something else, I continued. I'll be moving into a new role in January, Chief Talent Officer. Derek's eyebrows rose slightly. That's significant. Congratulations. Thank you, I said. One of my first initiatives will be establishing a feedback system for managers to receive unfiltered input from their team members, anonymized, of course, but specific enough to be actionable. I watched as understanding dawned in his expression. Such a system would have exposed his biased practices years earlier, potentially changing the course of many careers, including my own. That sounds valuable, he said carefully. Managers can develop blind spots without realizing it. Exactly, I agreed. The goal isn't punitive, it's developmental, creating awareness of patterns that might otherwise remain invisible. Derek nodded slowly. I would have benefited from such feedback earlier in my career. It was as close to a full acknowledgement of his past behavior as I was likely to get. And in truth, it was enough. I hadn't initiated this conversation seeking apology or closure. I had wanted to demonstrate that the changes we were implementing weren't about individual grievances, but about building better systems for everyone, even those who had once perpetuated the problems. "The program will launch in February," said, standing to leave. "I'd welcome your input as it develops." The inclusion was deliberate, an invitation to be part of the solution rather than simply identified as part of the problem. Real change required both accountability and opportunity for growth. As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. From overlooked analyst to executive leadership, from navigating biased systems to redesigning them, from individual frustration to organizational impact. The path hadn't been linear or fair. It had required strategic patience, meticulous documentation, and the courage to bypass established channels when necessary. It had demanded that I maintain my confidence even when systems were designed to undermine it. But the outcome had exceeded anything I could have imagined when I first discovered Derek's email revealing his deliberate efforts to block my advancement. I had sought recognition and appropriate advancement. I had found not just those things, but also a platform to create meaningful change for others. On my last day as Executive Vice President before my transition to the C-suite, I returned to my office after a series of meetings to find a small gathering of my team waiting. They had arranged a modest celebration, cupcakes, coffee, and heartfelt cards expressing their appreciation. "We wanted to thank you," Sophia said, acting as spokesperson for the group. "Not just for the professional opportunities you've created, but for showing us what's possible when leadership centers on fairness and recognition." As I looked around at these talented individuals, each with their own aspirations, capabilities, and potential, I felt profound gratitude for the opportunity to have influenced their professional journeys, even briefly. Building this division together has been the highlight of my career, I told them honestly. The culture we've created isn't dependent on any one person. It's built into how we work together, how we recognize contributions, how we develop talent. That continues regardless of my new role. Later, alone in my office as I packed the personal items I would transfer to my new executive suite, I came across a folder I had nearly forgotten, the one containing my careful documentation of Derek's systematic undermining of my contributions over the years. The evidence I had gathered but never formally used, choosing instead to let my work speak for itself when the acquisition created new opportunities. I held the folder for a moment, considering its significance. Then I dropped it into the shredder, beside my desk. Those pages represented a chapter that had closed. Their purpose had been fulfilled, not in confrontation or vindication, but in the clarity they had provided about what needed to change. The most meaningful response to having been undervalued wasn't fighting endless battles over past injustices. It was creating systems where such injustices became less possible. It was using the insight gained through difficult experiences to build something better for everyone. As I looked out at the mountains framed by my office window, I thought about the metaphorical mountains I had climbed to reach this point. The journey had been challenging, sometimes discouraging, occasionally infuriating. But the view from here, the perspective it provided, the impact it enabled, made every difficult step worthwhile. Derek had blocked every promotion for 5 years, but the acquisition team had seen what he refused to acknowledge. And in doing so, they had unleashed potential not just for me, but for an entire organization ready for transformation. Sometimes, the longest detours lead to the most meaningful destinations. And sometimes the people who try to limit your growth end up teaching you exactly how to transcend those limitations, not just for yourself, but for everyone who follows. 18 months after the acquisition that changed everything, I stood at the podium in the Grand Hotel's Summit Ballroom, the same venue where I'd once sipped champagne while Derek told me I still wasn't ready for advancement. Today, I was delivering the keynote address at Horizon's annual leadership conference as the newly appointed Chief Talent Officer. The irony wasn't lost on me. This journey had begun with a manager blocking every promotion for 5 years and ended with me reshaping how the entire organization identified, developed, and advanced talent. Life had a way of creating perfect symmetry sometimes. Leadership isn't defined by title or authority, I began, looking out at the gathered executives, managers, and high-potential employees identified through our new talent assessment framework. It's defined by impact and influence, by the ability to create environments where others can excel, by recognizing potential that others might miss. For the next 40 minutes, I shared our vision for transforming talent development across the global organization. I outlined the new systems we had created, objective assessment criteria, blind review processes for project assignments, structured sponsorship programs for underrepresented groups, and transparent advancement pathways. These aren't just programs, I emphasized. They represent a fundamental shift in how we identify and nurture talent. A shift away from advancement based on who you know or how closely you resemble current leadership. A shift toward recognition, based on genuine impact and potential. As I presented case studies from our pilot initiatives, I noticed several managers taking detailed notes. Among them was Thomas, Derek's former protege who had once been positioned to take the role. That should have been mine. He had since become a respected product manager, one who had personally reached out to me for guidance on creating more inclusive team practices. His journey represented its own form of systemic change. The preliminary results are compelling. I continued, displaying metrics from our first 6 months of implementation. Retention of high-potential employees from underrepresented groups has increased by 42%. Cross-functional collaboration on strategic initiatives has grown by 37%. And most tellingly, we've seen a 51% increase in innovation metrics from teams participating in our inclusive leadership program. CEO James Cooper, seated in the front row, nodded approvingly. These weren't just feel-good cultural achievements, they were driving measurable business value. But beyond the numbers, I said, my tone softening, are the individual stories. The analyst whose breakthrough algorithm improved customer targeting after years of having her ideas dismissed. The product manager whose international experience brought unique insights that transformed our market approach. The developer whose accessibility innovations made our platform available to entirely new customer segments. I didn't name these individuals, but many in the audience would recognize the references to Sophia, Marcus, and David, all members of my original data strategy division who had flourished when given the right opportunities and recognition. These contributions weren't created by our talent development program, I clarified. They always existed as potential. What changed was our ability to see them, to value them, and to create pathways for them to develop into tangible business impact. As I concluded my presentation, I shared one final thought, the core insight that had emerged from my own journey. The most valuable assets in any organization are often hidden in plain sight. They're the overlooked analyst solving problems no one else can tackle. They're the quiet team member whose ideas only get recognized when repeated by someone else. They're the dedicated professional who keeps delivering excellence despite limited recognition. I paused, letting the words resonate. Our responsibility as leaders isn't just to manage the talent we easily recognize. It's to create systems that reveal the full spectrum of potential that exists within our organization. Because when we do that, when we truly see and develop all our talent, we don't just create better careers, we create better businesses, better products, and better futures. The applause that followed was gratifying, but what meant more were the conversations that happened afterward. Managers approached me with specific questions about implementing these practices in their departments. High-potential employees shared their experiences of finally feeling seen and valued. Even a few executives admitted that the presentation had challenged their assumptions about what leadership looked like. As the formal program transitioned to a networking reception, James Cooper made his way to my side. "Exceptional presentation, Sarah," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "The board was right to prioritize this initiative and to put you in charge of it." "Thank you," I replied. "The response has been encouraging." James nodded thoughtfully. "You know what struck me most? The economic argument. We've been losing incredible talent because our systems weren't designed to recognize it. That's not just a moral failing. It's a business liability we can no longer afford." "Exactly," I agreed. "It's never been about lowering standards. It's about removing the artificial filters that prevent us from seeing the true capabilities of our people." "Well, the quarterly numbers speak for themselves," James said. "The divisions that have implemented your framework are outperforming across every metric: innovation, productivity, retention, even customer satisfaction." He glanced across the room to where Derek stood awkwardly at the periphery of a conversation group. Following the system migration project, he had been reassigned to a minor role in technical documentation, a position that utilized his thoroughness but limited his influence over others' careers. "Some people create success by lifting others up," James observed quietly. "Others try to create it by holding others down. The market eventually determines which approach creates more value." His insight was profound in its simplicity. Derek's approach hadn't just been unfair, it had been unsustainable. By artificially constraining talent, he had ultimately limited his own potential and the company's success. The acquisition was the catalyst, I noted. It created the opportunity for different eyes to see what was really happening. James smiled slightly. "Acquisitions reveal all kinds of hidden value and hidden problems. The best ones capitalize on the former and address the latter." He raised his glass once more, to seeing clearly. Later that evening, as the reception wound down, I found myself alone at a high-top table, reviewing notes for the next day's panel discussion. A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Chief Talent Officer Mitchell, quite a leap from senior. "Analyst." I looked up to see Derek standing there, drink in hand. His attempt at a conversational tone couldn't quite mask the complex emotions beneath. Perhaps regret, perhaps resentment, perhaps simple recognition of how thoroughly the tables had turned. "Life takes unexpected paths sometimes," I replied, neutrally. Derek nodded, glancing down at his drink. "Your keynote was insightful, particularly the part about hidden talent." I waited, sensing he had more to say. "I've been reflecting on my leadership approach," he continued after a moment. "The past year has been illuminating. Working under others after years of being in charge, it offers a new perspective. It was the closest thing to an admission of wrongdoing I was likely to get." Derek wasn't acknowledging his deliberate undermining of my career specifically, but he was recognizing that his leadership approach had been fundamentally flawed. "Perspective shifts can be valuable," I said evenly. "Indeed." Derek cleared his throat. "The guidance program you mentioned in your presentation, the one for managers to develop more inclusive leadership practices, is it open to everyone?" The question caught me by surprise. Derek was actually asking for help, becoming a better leader, a possibility I would have considered laughable 18 months ago. "It is," I confirmed. "The next cohort starts in January." Derek nodded, a flicker of something like humility crossing his features. "I'd be interested in participating, if that wouldn't be awkward, given our history." I considered his request carefully. The easy response would be dismissal or skepticism. After all, this was the man who had systematically blocked my advancement for 5 years, who had taken credit for my work, who had evaluated me based on manufactured limitations rather than actual performance. But the talent development system I was building wasn't about settling old scores. It was about creating opportunities for growth and improvement, even for those who had failed to provide those opportunities to others. The program is open to any manager committed to developing new leadership capabilities, I said finally. Your participation would be welcome. Relief flickered across Derek's face. Thank you. I'll submit the formal application tomorrow. After he walked away, I remained at the table, processing the unexpected interaction. There was a certain completion in it, not the satisfaction of revenge, but the more profound realization that the systems I was building could transform even those who had once used flawed systems against me. The next morning, I woke early to prepare for the day's panel discussions. As I sipped coffee on my hotel room balcony, overlooking the mountain landscape that had become so meaningful to me since moving to Denver, my phone chimed with an email notification. The message was from Maya Chen, the young woman I had met at the Women in Technology Leadership Conference, who had taken my advice about documenting her contributions and building networks beyond her obstructive manager. I wanted to share some exciting news, she wrote. I've accepted a director position at Horizon Innovations, in the new Seattle office opening next month. Your talent development program was actually mentioned during my interviews as something that differentiated Horizon from other opportunities. I start January 15th and can't wait to experience the culture you're building firsthand. I smiled as I read her message. Maya's journey had come full circle. From struggling under a manager who limited her potential to joining an organization actively working to recognize and develop talent like hers. And in a small but meaningful way, my own journey had helped make that possible. I replied immediately, congratulating her and offering to connect once she joined the company. The exchange reminded me of the exponential impact of changing systems rather than just navigating them. Maya would bring her talents to Horizon, contribute to our success, and likely help other talented individuals receive the recognition they deserved. The day's panel sessions focused on practical implementation of our talent development framework across different business contexts. As Chief Talent Officer, I moderated discussions between division leaders who had successfully adopted the new approaches and those still in early implementation. The conversations were refreshingly candid, addressing real challenges and sharing concrete solutions. Managers spoke about recalibrating their understanding of what leadership looked like. Division heads acknowledged discovering talent they hadn't previously recognized in their teams. HR partners described creating new systems that mitigated unconscious bias in evaluation and promotion decisions. During the final session of the day, Rebecca joined me on stage for a fireside chat about the future of talent development at Horizon. As the executive vice president who had first recognized my potential during the acquisition, she had become both mentor and ally in my rapid rise through the organization. The transformation we're discussing isn't a one-time initiative, Rebecca emphasized to the audience. It's a fundamental shift in how we identify, develop, and advance talent throughout our organization. And that shift is already creating measurable business value. She turned to me. Sarah, you've often spoken about hidden talent within organizations. How do we make that talent visible in ways that traditional systems might miss? It starts with questioning our assumptions about what leadership looks like, I replied. Many of our evaluation systems were designed, intentionally or not, to recognize specific leadership styles and overlook others. Collaborative problem solvers might be labeled not assertive enough. Methodical thinkers might be deemed not quick enough. Different communication styles might be misinterpreted as lack of confidence or commitment. I continued drawing on my own experience without explicitly referencing it. When we expand our understanding of how excellence in leadership can manifest, we suddenly discover talent that was always there, just not in the forms we were trained to recognize. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. That's been my experience as well. Some of the most impactful leaders I've worked with didn't fit conventional leadership molds. They led through influence rather than authority, through problem-solving rather than proclamation, through empowerment rather than control. Exactly, I agreed. Our new framework doesn't lower standards. It actually raises them by requiring specific, observable evidence of impact rather than subjective assessments of style or presence. As the session concluded and attendees filed out for the evening's closing reception, a woman approached the stage. She appeared to be in her mid-50s, with a confident bearing that suggested significant professional experience. "Ms. Mitchell," she said, extending her hand. "Barbara Winters, board member. I wanted to personally thank you for your work on the Talent Development Initiative. It's transforming our organization in ways we've been attempting unsuccessfully for years." "Thank you," I replied, appreciating the direct feedback from a board-level perspective. The executive team's support has been crucial to its success. Barbara smiled slightly. "Perhaps, but it's your lived experience that makes the difference. You understand these challenges from the inside, not as abstract concepts, but as real barriers you've navigated yourself." Her comment struck me. My journey through 5 years of blocked advancement hadn't been wasted time after all. It had provided insights and understanding that now informed organization-wide change at the highest levels. "The initiative is still evolving," I noted. "We're learning and refining as we implement across different divisions." "That's precisely the approach the board appreciates," Barbara replied. "You're building something sustainable, not just a quick-fix program that looks good in the annual report." She handed me her card. "I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss your insights further. My committee oversees governance and talent strategy. Your perspective would be valuable to our long-term planning." As Barbara walked away, I realized how profoundly my professional reality had transformed. 18 months ago, I had been struggling for basic recognition of my contributions. Now board members were seeking my strategic input on talent development across a global organization. The final evening of the leadership conference featured a celebration dinner in the hotel's grand ballroom, ironically, the same room where I had stood with Emma a year and a half earlier, discussing yet another promotion blocked by Derek. The cosmic symmetry wasn't lost on me as I took my place at the executive table, now as Chief Talent Officer. James Cooper opened the evening with remarks highlighting the company's transformation since the acquisition and recognizing key leaders who had driven that success. When he mentioned my name and the Talent Development Initiative, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic, acknowledgement from colleagues who had witnessed the positive changes firsthand. After dinner, as small groups formed for coffee and conversation, Emma found her way to my side. Now leading her own division after a well-deserved promotion, she had been a steadfast ally throughout my journey. "Full circle," she observed, gesturing around the ballroom. "Remember standing over there, discussing Derek's latest excuse for passing you over?" I nodded, smiling at the memory that no longer carried any sting. "Who would have imagined we'd be here now?" "I would," Emma replied. Confidently. "I always told you it was just a matter of time until someone recognized what was right in front of them." We chatted about the conference highlights and her division's recent successes, then Emma's expression grew more serious. "I saw you talking with Derek yesterday," she said. "That looked civil." "It was," I confirmed. "He's applied for the Inclusive Leadership Program." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? The man who built his career on taking credit for other people's work wants to learn inclusive leadership?" I shrugged slightly. People can change when circumstances force them to see differently. His position now gives him a new perspective on how it feels to be overlooked or undervalued. "Very generous interpretation," Emma noted skeptically. "I'm not sure I could be that magnanimous." "It's not about magnanimity," I explained. "The systems we're building have to work for everyone, even those who previously perpetuated the problems. Otherwise, we're just creating new forms of exclusion." Emma considered this, then nodded slowly. That's why you're the chief talent officer, and I'm still learning. You see the bigger patterns. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone for a moment, watching the interactions across the ballroom. Executive team members engaged with emerging leaders from diverse backgrounds. Managers who had implemented the new talent framework shared experiences with those still in early stages. A genuine community of practice was forming around our shared commitment to recognizing and developing talent in all its forms. In that moment, I fully understood that my 5 years of blocked promotions hadn't been a detour or a waste. They had been a crucial education, providing insights that now allowed me to create meaningful change for others. The very experience that had once felt so frustrating had become the foundation for transformation that extended far beyond my individual career. 2 years after the acquisition that had changed everything, I sat in my executive office reviewing the annual talent metrics. The results were compelling. Promotion rates had equalized across gender and ethnic categories for the first time in company history. Retention of high-potential employees had increased by 38%. Employee engagement scores had reached their highest levels ever, particularly in dimensions related to recognition and growth opportunities. Most significantly, these cultural improvements were translating directly to business results. Divisions that had fully implemented our talent framework were outperforming others across all key metrics: innovation, productivity, customer satisfaction, and ultimately, profitability. A knock at my door interrupted my review. It was Sophia Wright, now Director of Customer Analytics after a well-deserved promotion 6 months earlier. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Of course," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Sophia sat down looking both excited and slightly nervous. "I received an unexpected call from James Cooper yesterday. He wants me to lead the new predictive analytics division they're creating in the Singapore office. It would mean relocating, of course, but also a significant promotion and the chance to build something from the ground up." "That's a tremendous opportunity," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "Your work on the customer journey mapping framework has been revolutionary. This recognition is well-deserved." "I wanted to thank you," Sophia continued. "This wouldn't have happened without the changes you've implemented. 3 years ago, someone like me, a woman of color without the right connections or the right executive style, wouldn't have been considered for a role like this, no matter how strong the results." Her words touched me deeply. This was exactly the kind of transformation I had hoped to create, opening pathways for talented individuals who might otherwise have remained overlooked or undervalued. "You earned this through your exceptional work," I told her. "The only thing that's changed is our ability to see and recognize that excellence regardless of how it's packaged." Sophia nodded. "Still, the system you built made that possible, and I want you to know that I'm planning to implement the same talent development framework in Singapore. The cycle continues." After she left, I turned back to the talent metrics on my screen, seeing them with fresh perspective. Behind every statistic were real people like Sophia, professionals whose contributions were now being recognized and whose potential was being developed. The impact would continue to ripple outward as they advanced into leadership positions and implemented similar approaches in their own spheres of influence. The following week, I presented these results to the board's Talent Strategy Committee, chaired by Barbara Winters. The reception was overwhelmingly positive, with board members particularly noting the clear connection between inclusive talent practices and business performance. "The question now becomes expansion and sustainability," Barbara noted as the presentation concluded. "How do we ensure these changes become permanent rather than dependent on specific champions or initiatives?" It was a crucial question, one I had been considering since taking the Chief Talent Officer role. "We've been working on 3 key elements," I explained. "First, embedding these practices in our operational systems rather than treating them as separate diversity programs. Second, creating objective success metrics that hold leaders accountable for talent development. And third, building a leadership pipeline that reflects these values and will sustain them over time. Barbara nodded approvingly. The board is fully committed to this direction. In fact, we've decided to make talent development metrics a formal component of executive compensation going forward. 20% of long-term incentives will be tied directly to the frameworks you've established. This was a significant commitment, one that would ensure continued focus and resources even as business priorities evolved. By tying executive rewards directly to talent development outcomes, the board was signaling that these weren't nice-to-have cultural initiatives, but core business imperatives. As the meeting concluded, Barbara asked me to stay behind for a brief conversation. "The board has been impressed with your leadership of the talent transformation," she said once we were alone. "We see clear alignment between your approach and our long-term strategic vision for the company." I thanked her for the feedback, appreciating the board-level recognition of work that had begun less than 2 years earlier. "We're also thinking ahead," Barbara continued. "James Cooper plans to retire within the next 3 years. The succession planning process is already underway, identifying potential internal candidates for CEO." I nodded, understanding the board's responsibility for this critical transition. "Your name has been included in that conversation," Barbara said directly. "Obviously, this is long-range planning, and much will depend on how your leadership continues to develop over the next several years. But the board believes your strategic vision and demonstrated ability to drive organizational transformation merit serious consideration." The statement caught me completely by surprise. CEO succession planning was typically reserved for long-tenured executives with decades of experience across multiple business functions. For me to be included in that conversation after less than 2 years in executive leadership was unprecedented. "I'm honored to be considered," I said carefully, "though I recognize there's still much for me to learn and experience before such a role would be appropriate." Barbara smiled. "That self-awareness is precisely one of the qualities the board values. We'll be creating development opportunities to broaden your exposure to other aspects of the business over the coming years. The point isn't to rush the process, but to ensure we're developing all potential succession candidates thoughtfully." As I walked back to my office, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. 5 years of blocked promotions under Derek's biased leadership, the accidental email revealing his deliberate undermining of my advancement, the strategic documentation and networking that had positioned me to be recognized when the acquisition created new opportunity, the rapid progression from division director to executive vice president to chief talent officer, and now, inclusion in CEO succession planning, not as the designated heir, but as a serious candidate worthy of development and consideration. The path hadn't been fair or straightforward. It had required patience, strategic thinking, and the courage to bypass established channels when necessary. It had demanded that I maintain confidence in my capabilities, even when systems were designed to make me doubt them. But the outcome had exceeded anything I could have imagined when I first discovered Derek's systematic efforts to block my advancement. I had sought appropriate recognition and advancement. I had found not just those things, but also a platform to create meaningful change for countless others facing similar barriers. As I reached my office, I noticed a small package on my desk, with a handwritten note. The note was from Maya Chen, who had recently joined Horizon as a director in our Seattle office after taking my advice about documenting her contributions and building networks beyond her obstructive manager. A small token of appreciation for guidance that changed my professional path, the note read. Now I'm in a position to pay it forward. Inside the package was a beautiful journal with an inscription on the first page. Your story helped me rewrite mine. Now I'm helping others author theirs. I smiled as I traced the embossed cover, thinking about how meaningful changes often begin with small acts of recognition and guidance. My journey hadn't just transformed my own career. It had created ripples that were now extending into others' professional lives, giving them the courage and strategies to overcome similar barriers. Derek had blocked every promotion for 5 years. The acquisition team had seen what he refused to acknowledge, and in doing so, they had unleashed potential that now extended far beyond my individual career, creating positive change throughout our organization and beyond. Sometimes, the most difficult paths lead to the most meaningful destinations. And sometimes, the people who try to limit your growth end up teaching you exactly how to transcend those limitations, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.